when the news broke about Oklahoma's quarterback, John Mateer, who's been leading this offense. He's a Heisman favorite and obviously a centerpiece for this 4-0 Oklahoma team, who is now ranked number 7 in the AP poll. It was really shocking news to a lot, to many people. And I think if you weren't a little bit surprised or caught off guard with this news, if you don't think that this is big news, then you just haven't been paying attention. This was huge. He has suffered a broken bone in his right throwing hand, believed to be the thumb, right around that area. And the injury actually happened during Saturday's win over Auburn. It was actually fairly early in the first quarter when this happened, which is quite impeccable when you consider that he played the entire game after that. And not only that, but he even got better as the game went on. Of course, as we mentioned before, closing out with the last 15 of his 16 throws and 11 completions in a row at some point during that. And just overall, the game-winning drive, of course, a game-winning touchdown, that late rushing touchdown from John Mateer. John Mateer, he ended up throwing for 271 yards, and of course, that late rushing touchdown, but then also a passing touchdown to seal that 24-17 win over Auburn. So quite crazy when you consider the timing of when that happened. And I think that alone, I'm going to stop right there. I think that alone should keep Oklahoma fans a little bit optimistic about John Mateer's return. And I think that alone, knowing that he was able to finish the game with it actively being fractured, of course, going into surgery and getting that fixed is going to be a much different story. But having that fracture in your hand and finishing the game is quite impressive. Again, finishing the game with improving as the game went along. That second half was by far much better than what that first half looked for John Mateer. And so closing it out with a fractured hand, with whatever it was, a fracture in his hand. Again, like I said, I believe that was in the thumb, but still just crazy that he was able to finish it out, which should give you some optimism about this, that if he was able to finish it, then maybe he's going to heal pretty quickly. Of course, hopefully this surgery goes well, and I'll get to more of that in just a moment. But after some evaluation, Oklahoma did mention today and broke the news to everybody that it was determined that he needed surgery, that this was going to be the best for his long-term and short-term, really just looking out for his short-term future and his long-term future and where he goes with his career. And of course, it's scheduled for tomorrow, Wednesday, the 24th in Los Angeles. So they're getting him out there right away, getting him to get this surgery. And it is by a world-renowned doctor, Dr. Stephen Shin, who is a great, one of the nation's best hand and wrist specialists. And this name may sound familiar to some who are kind of freaks in that world. It wasn't to me, but after reading some about Dr. Stephen Shin, he's actually a world-renowned doctor and actually known even in the sports world because he's worked on guys with similar injuries, with guys like Drew Brees or even Steph Curry, Mike Trout, some big-name athletes that have gone to and trusted Dr. Stephen Shin. So that is very good news to know that Oklahoma's actually got the resources to get him into one of the world's best, not just the nation's best, but one of the world's best doctors, specifically in this part, where his fracture is. And so that should give us some ease to know that it should go very well with a doctor that is this experienced, especially this experienced with high-profile athletes even, and understanding the type of injuries that athletes go through and the type of rehab that they're going to need to get back out on the field. And he also understands the importance of getting him right and getting him back out there. So some really good news surrounding this terrible news, right? So, of course, the Sooners do say that John Mateer will be out about a month is what the time frame is. There's no real strict timetable, but the expectation is that he's going to return some point in this season. That means that he's going to miss some key games. That's what I'm going to say right now. Of course, a bye week this week, which is really good timing. And then Kent State, again, really good timing when you're okay with having to work out any kind of kinks in the run game. Allow Michael Hawkins Jr. to go out there and do his thing. So, I think this is a really good timing for all of this to happen. But the bad timing is that you are going to get into that Red River rivalry. And I'm going to break it to you right now. I know a lot of Oklahoma fans are trying to be optimistic about this. I think a lot of Oklahoma fans are hoping that, man, this could turn around. But by the way that the university is acting, at least the staff is acting, by the way that you look at how some of these things go down, I would not expect John Mateer to be back for that Texas game. Now, does that mean that Oklahoma's going to lose? I'll get to that. All right. I will get to more of the optimism behind this. I'm going to start off with the pessimism right now because I personally do not think that John Mateer will be back by the Texas game. And that sucks because Oklahoma fans have seen this. It's like a deja vu. It's like waking up from a bad nightmare to find out that you're still living it. You get into that Red River rivalry and you're finally feeling good about your team even at some points. You go back a few seasons ago, you're feeling good about where the team's going, and Dylan Gabriel's looking like he's clicking really well, and he's injured, and you don't have a backup to fall back on, and bam, there you are. You lose again, not at full strength, and it's going to be misconstrued by Texas fans. Texas fans are already jumping on it and knowing that Oklahoma's going to have an excuse. No, it's a true reason too. I mean, there is a fine line that you have to draw to understand that there's a difference between excuses and reasoning. And, obviously that's one of them, of course, last year being another reasoning. You're not really at full strength. You're not at full strength anywhere. And then you don't even really have the guy that maybe, to my opinion, should have been in there as the starting in that game. At least the guy that was that was the starter to begin the season. So there's all kinds of things that you can look at there. Just I am not expecting John Mateer to be in there. I don't think he will be in there for the South Carolina game either. I think Ole Miss will probably be his return. And, honestly, I don't think that's a terrible thing. I think that's about the time that he's going to return and about the time that Oklahoma feels really good, because I think Oklahoma can beat South Carolina just fine with the team that they've got without John Mateer. Texas is a different story. I think that's going to be a tougher matchup now without John Mateer, but I'll get to some of that. I do think that's still a winnable game, and there really isn't any excuse just because John Mateer is out because of Michael Hawkins and his experience. Again, we'll get to that. I'm not trying to jump ahead of myself, but if Ole Miss was the beginning of John Mateer's return, here's what you've got. You've got him for Ole Miss, who is a really good team this year, much better than I anticipated. And you've got him for Tennessee, again, another team much better than I anticipated. Alabama, who's getting back on the right track and starting to look like Alabama should. And then Missouri, way better than I anticipated. Again, this is kind of a reoccurring theme. And then LSU, who I think is better than most give credit for. Better than most give credit for. And I will come out and say it. I didn't get my rankings out this week. I really wanted to, and I probably won't now that it's already Tuesday. I probably won't get my own personal rankings out there, but I will keep those up because I think I like putting it out there. I like seeing the reactions. I think everybody just overreacts thinking that my team should be ranked higher. But anyways, I have LSU as this week probably not the top team. Last week, I put them up there as the top team. This week, it seems like some teams have really separated themselves, and so I can really put a mixture of teams up there in the number one. I think numbers 1 through number 7 on my list were really just about as good as you can get to place them all at number 1. But LSU was my number 1 team because they have a defense this year. Their offense is struggling, I suppose, in some regard. They're not as good as they were in a couple of years past. But this is a team led by Brian Kelly that looks like a good Brian Kelly team. Therefore, that's why I'm higher on LSU. Anyways, I digress. This stretch is where Oklahoma needs him the most. I think Oklahoma, if they can go 1-1 in that Texas and South Carolina without John Mateer, 2-1 when you count State, which I think should be there. If you can go 2-1 there and you get John Mateer back for Ole Miss, Tennessee, Alabama, Missouri, and LSU, you have to still feel really good about at least a 10-2. And a 10-2, I think Oklahoma fans should feel ecstatic about, especially hanging your hat on the fact that you didn't have your key quarterback in for 3 games, your star quarterback. So I will say there's going to be some panic, and when you're talking about a guy with this stature, with the stats that John Mateer has put up so far this season, that you have to be a little worried, because let's not forget what John Mateer has done already throughout this season. Through four games, he's thrown for over 1,200 yards, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's at 190 yards on the ground, and then 5 rushing touchdowns on top of that. And currently, the current longest streak for most games. That's 10 straight games with a passing and rushing touchdown. And you see why he's getting everyone's Heisman talk. Everyone's Heisman conversation revolves around John Mateer, and he's at the top of most people's Heisman list for a very good reason. Of course, now probably plummeting and dropping off of that list. I saw in many sports books where he's basically out of the top 10 now to win the Heisman. I think that might be a little premature because who knows, maybe he is only out for one game and he returns for Texas. If that was the case, I think he soars right back up to the top, of course, depending on how well that performance against Texas is. But this was an outstanding performance so far for John Mateer, who also was named SEC Player of the Week in Week 2 whenever Oklahoma took on Michigan, and he had an outstanding performance there and led them to victory. He has really led them all the way through this season to their victories. Of course, the defense being the top performers there, but he's been right there in the mix and really helping out and keeping this offense just consistent and coherent. That's really important. So what does this mean for Oklahoma? Where do they go now? Of course, everyone knows, everyone who has paid attention, everybody who knows a little bit about Oklahoma football knows that here comes Michael Hawkins Jr., the sophomore who's going to get the starting nod for the Oklahoma Sooners while Mateer is sidelines. And it's a big opportunity for the young buck. It's a big opportunity for the young man who stepped in a season ago and I think earned a lot of Oklahoma fans' respect because he stepped in, did not quiver. He showed some heart. He wasn't ready for the opportunity, and I mentioned that. I was never hating on John Mateer, stuck in my head. I was never hating on Michael Hawkins Jr. a season ago. I just didn't think that he was ready. I didn't think that the spotlight might have been too bright for him. It's just that I don't think that he was ready to be thrown in the fire just yet. I see the potential, though. I see the heart. I see where he could lead this team and what he could do for this team. And that's why I think Oklahoma fans need to be a little calm and collective about this and understanding that this is a guy that has seen plenty of SEC play. He's seen the plains at Jordan-Hare. He has seen the Texas defense. He's also seen the worst side of South Carolina's defense. I mean, the worst side in terms of the best that South Carolina's defense has thrown at him. So that being said, I think Michael Hawkins Jr. is ready for this moment. Now, I do go back to a couple of games ago. I didn't think he really looked good whenever he came in against Temple. Although he wasn't in there for very long and he didn't really get to showcase too much. He didn't really get a whole lot of attempts to throw the ball. He didn't really get a wide open playbook the way that John Mateer does. So I will give some leniency there. But I do think that Michael Hawkins Jr., as much as they've talked about him, and you even have to think about how Brent Venables feels about Michael Hawkins Jr. and even Ben Arbuckle. They've both given him high praise about his toughness, his determination. They feel confident in him and how, they've been giving him reps in practice as if they're preparing him for this exact moment. And so, of course, that will come to fruition, and we'll see how much that preparation has really shown off. Of course, not this week, but next week against Kent State. And then the biggest test, if he is playing against Texas, does he get a redemption game against Texas to show who Michael Hawkins Jr. really is? Because I know that the stats that you see from Michael Hawkins Jr. a season ago does not go to show who he is as a football player. The player that you saw on the field last year, when you just look at the performance, is not who Michael Hawkins Jr. is. The glimpses that you got, the small glimpse that you got here and there on the field from Michael Hawkins Jr., that is the player that we know. The huge 40-some yard touchdown, it might have been longer than that, so forgive me if I'm underselling him there. The big touchdown, his first career touchdown, or I guess not his first career touchdown, because I believe he scored against Tennessee. So again, forgive me for forgetting some of what happened last season, but we've all tried to erase that out of our memories. But the big touchdown against Auburn, his first starting experience, and going to Jordan-Hare and performing that well at Auburn a season ago, I do think that he was a big part of that win. I do think he was a big part of that victory. And, I think he showed a lot of poise in that moment. And again, going back to the Tennessee game when he came in the second half, it showed the type of poise that he has. It shows the type of player that he is. He does have that grit. He does have the ability to go out there and make big plays. And so I think Oklahoma fans can take a little bit of a chill pill, I guess you might say. They can step back and just relax a little bit, knowing that Michael Hawkins Jr. will take over in the meantime, and he is just fine. He will be just fine, and so I think Oklahoma fans can be a little bit calm knowing that that's the case. A little bit of optimism for Oklahoma as they know that John Mateer is not going to be in for at least one, maybe 2 or 3 games, and who knows, maybe even more than that, is that I don't really look at this offense and think that this offense is what's winning these games for Oklahoma so far. This is an offense, again, if you go back to the two Power Four teams that they've played in, Michigan and Auburn, really hasn't put up any kind of eye-catching or total awe stats. It's not these kind of stats that you're looking at that says that they can run all over any defense. In fact, they can't run to save their lives, it seems. And they're not really throwing up these huge stat lines against any defense. They're able to find some kinks in the armor. They're able to find some weak points, and they're able to get down there and score enough to win games. But again, you go to the Auburn game where you scored 24, and then what was it against? Was it 27 against Michigan? So you're scoring in the mid-20s. It's not like this is an offense that's scoring 40 on these high-powered defenses, these powerful defenses. They're controlling the ball. They're not giving it up and going 3 and out immediately like they were a season ago. And the defense is standing tall. The defense knows that they can put the ball in the offense's hands and have some hope. With John Mateer, you have a lot of hope. I don't think that hope goes completely away with Michael Hawkins Jr. back there. But this defense is head and toes better, head and shoulders better, I should say. They are so much better than what we saw a season ago. And you can say that maybe the skill is better. I don't think that's the case, because if you look at the skill a season ago, I just don't think the skill is better. I think in some areas, Oklahoma's actually weaker at skill points because you've got a couple of freshmen, that are having to step up in key roles. You've got guys that really haven't played a whole lot in recent years, such as Gentry Williams. I'm not talking any of them down. They are performing amazing. But this is a defense that, again, I think that the stats that you see on defense are so much better this year because of what the offense is doing. It's a complementary football in the way that Oklahoma wished that they could play a season ago. And so this defense, fourth best scoring defense in the nation, okay? I mean, this is the best defense in the SEC, one of the best, if not the best. Chad and I were talking about this on Sunday. I don't know a defense that I would rather pick over Oklahoma's defense. Now, is there a specific group that I might take over Oklahoma's group? Maybe I would swap a group or so. But honestly, the way that the cohesion is over on that defensive side of the ball, that might be a mistake.